lined up to get their money out, and video of that made the rounds on social media. And we do also have news from United Airlines that says it sees first quarter operating revenue up 51%. That's slightly higher than the 50% it saw, and also sees first quarter total operating revenue higher compared to before. So we're monitoring that stock as well in the after hours trading. The yield on the 10-year about 3.54% right now. Spot gold, it's been higher all day, up more than 2.3%. And Brent crude, NYMEX crude, you name it, all the crudes closed sharply lower today. Looking at NYMEX crude, it closed down about 2.7%. And that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Denise, thank you so much. Carol Master along with Katie Greifeld live in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio right here on Bloomberg Business Week, brought to you by Innovation Refunds. This is your daily reminder from Innovation Refunds. The sacrifices you made keeping your employees on payroll during the pandemic are not forgotten. Check the potential refund your small to medium-sized business may be eligible to receive through the Employee Retention Credit with no upfront cost. Learn more at getrefunds.com. All right, as you know, the yield on the 2-year dropping the most in decades. Stocks, including tech stocks, rebounding from last week's rout as the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank reverberated across trading desks around the globe. Turmoil has caused a swift reassessment, I should say, of the direction of Fed policy and a lot more. So let's get some perspective and thoughts on that. Back with us is Bloomberg New Economy Editorial Director Eric Schatzker, also Editor-at-Large here at Bloomberg. He's here in our studio with Katie and myself. So we have a lot to talk about, including an upcoming event that New Economy is doing. But I do want to ask you, you were in the trenches like a lot of us during the great financial crisis when we didn't go to bed on Sunday nights because the news just kept happening. How do you think about what's going on today against something like that?
Well, the first thought I had was, had the Fed known how much of a monetary tightening a bank collapse could have, maybe it would have let SVB fail sooner.
Nice.
This is not the great financial crisis. Come on. This is one bank, two banks, of course, because Signature Bank failed yesterday. And federal regulators, the FDIC and the Fed and the federal government in its entirety, acted very swiftly to put a floor underneath the entire banking system and, to a degree, the entire U.S. economy. If a bank can take all of its high-quality assets, no matter what the mark-to-market value, and pledge them at 100 cents on the dollar for a loan from the Fed for a year, we've at least forestalled the crisis by that much time. And probably, I mean, nobody can say anything with 100% certainty, but the market is telling you effectively the same thing. Look at what's happened with bond yields. Look at what happened with short-term note yields. Look at what's happened today with stock prices. Initially, things were pretty squirrely, but they settled down. And that's not to say that there won't be volatility in the days to come. And other stocks, particularly regional banking stocks and broker-dealers like Schwab, may continue to come under some pressure. But liquidity is available. And so long as individuals and corporate clients don't panic, and there is now no reason they should, this should, over time, subside. It's not the financial crisis, and it's definitely not the savings and loan crisis of the late 1980s.
Well, Eric, to your point that liquidity is available, and as you described, I mean, U.S. regulators stepped in pretty decisively last night. A take that I've seen make the rounds, mostly on finance Twitter, to be sure, but still just
echo chamber.
It's the echo chamber of Twitter, but the point has been made that this introduces an element of moral hazard into the market. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, well, anytime the federal government does this, of course it introduces moral hazard, and that's precisely what people like Larry Summers was arguing against, or arguing what Larry Summers was citing as an argument against a full bank bailout in the financial crisis. But truly, what alternative did they have? Yes, on the one hand, it introduces moral hazard. Yes, some people perceive it as a bailout of the tycoons of private equity and venture capital like Peter Thiel and Michael Moritz of Sequoia Capital and others. But there's an ecosystem here of companies that have to make payroll, companies whose employees have to pay rent and be current on their mortgages, And the third and fourth order effects were such, even from a bank as small as SVP and Signature, that and the signs clearly were that contagion was going to spread to others, Western Alliance, Zions, First Republic, etc. You need only look at their stock prices on Friday and today to see that the Fed didn't want to take the risk. And it's not just the Fed, again, it's the Treasury Department, it's the FDIC, it's the OCC, it's everybody involved. Because there are consequences to acting now. The consequences of acting later might be worse.
All right. So this is what we're talking about today. You guys, next month, I'm talking about Bloomberg New Economy, you're going to do your inaugural European New Economy Gateway Ireland in April.
We'll be talking about this.
So, so how do you kind of think about as you guys program? We just were talking with Mary Buckley, the interim CEO of IDA Ireland, who you guys are partnering, or who's partnering with you on this event. How are you thinking about it in terms of...
Well, I'm thinking about that in terms of the financing pipeline for innovation. SVB and Silicon Valley Bank played an important role there. And it will not be playing that role any longer, at least SVB won't. Maybe others that take over some of SVB's businesses will, but the central role that it had as a provider of credit lines to venture capital firms and a lender to venture capital portfolio companies and a processor of their needs, such as cash management, deposits, foreign exchange, etc., that's gone, at least in the present. So that community of venture capitalists and the industries they support have to figure out where their future sources of financing are going to come and how solid they'll be. There's always money available, but money comes at a different price, perhaps. And they have to, what the banking system and federal regulators, not just here but elsewhere, are surely recognizing now is that there was concentration risk, unrecognized concentration risk in SVB. On the one hand, there was this single point of failure aspect to it that we saw play out very quickly. And on the other hand, SVB clearly was a creature in many ways of the financialization of the U.S. economy. Once upon a time, it was a lender to startups. It became, more than anything else, a lender to venture capital firms, and not just the venture capital firms for the purposes of making investments, not at all. It became a lender to venture capital firms providing what are called subscription lines of credit. In other words, giving venture capital firms money so that they make equity investments before they have to call on their limited partners. And that's, I say financialization because that's financial engineering. That's not actually helping anybody. It's just helping them put up better smoother internal rates of return.
And I'm going to reveal myself as someone who spends a lot of time online, but I think it was Joe Weisenthal who made the point on Twitter that SVB came into existence, I think, in 1983.
40 years ago.
So, yeah, this incredible, just like, period of time bookend on both ends by SVB. And you talked a little bit about, how important this was to the private equity world and what this meant for Silicon Valley in terms of the tech scene. I mean, what does this mean for the future of the U.S. tech scene for years to come and globally, too? I mean, what are the potential ripple effects?
Well, I think it has less to do with SVB and more to do with the underlying point to Joe's observation, which is that SVB was born at the beginning of the bond bull market, and it died, effectively, at what we might call the end of the bond bull market.
That's zero interest rates.
But there have been ups and downs in interest rates over that period of time, and venture capital as an industry proved quite resilient.
We went through the great financial crisis at that time.
So,
tech bubbles.
I mean, if the suggestion by anybody, I don't think it is Joe's suggestion, is that venture capital is doomed. I don't think it's doomed. I think, as with everything else, the cost of capital is rising. It'll be harder to do deals. The hurdle rates are going to be higher. The success rates will be lower. And it'll be a tough patch in the startup world. And maybe the returns on venture capital investments will on the whole be lower. But then we'll enter a new cycle, presumably at some point, where interest rates will be declining And these kinds of investments in higher risk, in higher risk companies or higher risk vehicles, with more, and that's my phone, forgive me. It's my daughter, for those who need to know. I just silenced the ring. I'll give her a call back. Right, so the return, but once again, as is the case with all cycles,
right,
it'll improve.
Eric, thank you so much. And as we said, the Bloomberg New Economy Gateway Europe event, April 19th and 20th in Ireland.
It's going to be fantastic.
All right, looking forward to it and hearing more. All right, our Eric Shasker. Right now, it's time to go to Leslie Latto and World of National News. She's in our New York newsroom. Hey, Leslie.
Hey there. President Biden trying to calm Americans' fears following the failure of these two banks we've been speaking about all day long.
Americans can rest assured that our banking system is safe. Your deposits are safe. Let me also assure you, we will not stop at this. We'll do whatever is needed.
In those remarks this morning, the president said customers with accounts at SVB Bank in California and Signature in New York will have access to their money. He said that banking losses will not be taken on by the taxpayers, but will instead come from fees banks pay into the Deposit Insurance Fund. This comes after the two sudden insolvencies of the two institutions. The chair of the Senate Banking Committee, Bill Hagerty of Tennessee, tells Bloomberg regulators definitely have a situation on their hands.
Auction process over the weekend failed. During the weekend, they actually did receive a bid. I'd urge strongly that they should take the most competitive offer and have a bank in place today when the market opened.
Hagerty said even though taxpayers will not be paying for it, banks will have an increased fee. As the president said, millions along the East Coast bracing for a powerful nor'easter. Forecasters say the next 18 to 36 hours will bring snow, heavy rain, strong wind, power outages, and coastal flooding. And a split by jurors means no death penalty on the table for an Islamic extremist who maniacally raced a truck along a popular New York City bike path, killing 8 people. 35-year-old Sayfullo Saipov from Uzbekistan ran them down. The New Jersey resident gets an automatic life sentence. Global News 24/7, powered by 2,700 journalists and analysts over 120 countries. I'm Leslie Latto on Bloomberg.
Breaking market news from the Pacific Rim. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
I'm Brian Curtis.
And I'm Doug Krisner.
We'll get the latest on the fallout from the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and the risk for financial contagion.
And an update on the end of China's NPC and the impact of new policy on the Chinese economy.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. Tonight at 6 on Bloomberg 1130, the Bloomberg Business app, BloombergRadio.com, or listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts.
This commercial's just a minute, but sometimes that's all it takes. I'm Frank Calamari, president of Calvary Hospital, a hospital unlike any other. Calvary provides extra special care to people living with very complex medical needs, with cancer, heart, kidney failure, COPD, and other serious illnesses. Loving, compassionate, expert care in our hospital or in your home relieves their pain and improves quality of life. And not just for the person who's sick. We also care for families and loved ones, because we know they need comfort too. If you or someone you love is facing a life-limiting illness, take a minute and talk to us about Calvary Care, our 123-year tradition of compassion, caring, commitment, dignity, and non-abandonment. Call 718-518-2000 for the extra special care you need, or visit calvaryhospital.org. Calvary Hospital, where life continues.
Access a vast selection of global fixed income securities at Interactive Brokers Bond Marketplace. Search their deep availability of over 1 million bonds globally. IBKR has no markups or built-in spreads and low, fully transparent commissions on bonds. IBKR displays the highest bids and lowest offers received from the electronic venues they access. In addition, clients can interact with each other by placing bids and offers online to execute their trades. Learn more at ibkr.com/bonds.
Let's have a let people pedal those bikes. Intervals. Burn. Burn. Come on, burn. Woo!
Performance is more exhilarating on a real road. Introducing the Audi Q5. With a 261 horsepower engine that'll take you 0 to 60 in 5.7 seconds. Always obey local speed and traffic laws.
Don't let someone else drive off in the Audi model you've always wanted. Visit your tri-state area Audi dealer to get behind the wheel of yours today, or visit AudiOffers.com for more information.
The New Deal created American infrastructure that unleashed new opportunity. Today, we're doing it again with massive investment in modernizing our infrastructure to build for tomorrow. At Build America Mutual, we protect your municipal bond investments that help make it happen, building a vibrant future for our communities and your portfolio. Invest in the future of America with BAM insured bonds.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand and in your podcast feed.
On the latest Sound On podcast, I talk with Republican Senator Bill Haggerty on the cause and response to the failure of Silicon Valley Bank.
Silicon Valley Bank back in 2019 was a $70 billion bank. I understand the cries that have been lashed out here in the past couple of days trying to blame this on the previous administration, but nothing, and they're talking about S-2155.
Yes.
Nothing under that law would have relieved the regulatory requirements on SVB. They would not have been included in any of this. Again, this is a distraction. Really, the question is, what was management doing and what were the regulators doing that allowed them to miss this?
You asked the chair of the Fed just last week, Senator, about capital requirements for banks and tailoring as some changes could be in the offing. I realize there's not a real proposal. The vice chair, though, is looking at this, looking at a study, and you were concerned about the end of tailoring. Does this change your view on that?
No, my concern right now is just making certain that regulators are looking at what they should be. And we have a situation here where we've had a very rapid increase in interest rates. That's caused a number of the securities that are in the, quote, hold to maturity bucket in banks' balance sheets to go underwater. And what should have been happening was these banks should have been managing their interest rate risk. Evidently, Silicon Valley Bank did not. They weren't anticipating liquidity requirements. When you have a customer base like Silicon Valley Banks, a lot of startup companies that are running with no revenues, that are burning cash, those demands are bound to be high. Again, you have mismanagement here as the culprit and a lack of oversight.
Hear the full conversation on the latest edition of the Bloomberg Sound On podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Plus, listen anytime on the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And it is 4:40 on Wall Street. We check the markets all day long and all night long for you here at Bloomberg, and we got a lot of shoes up in the air. Everybody waiting for another one to drop. Another one did not drop today, although some stocks did drop. We ended up closing mixed. On the one hand, concern about regional banks weighing on things after the two bank failures we've been talking about. On the other hand, some hope the Fed will lay off the rate hikes. But Subhadra Rajappa, head of U.S. rate strategy over at SocGen, says she is just not convinced the bank runs will force the Fed to stop raising.
It's very soon to make a call on the Fed being done. If you look at inflation, it's running very hot. You have a very strong labor market. And more importantly, financial conditions are easy. The financial stability risks seem to be somewhat ring-fenced and isolated with a couple of banks. The question really becomes one of, does the Fed have all the tools it needs to be able to contain this problem?
And Rajappa speaking there ahead of a choppy trading day. The Dow down just about 0.3% down, closing 90 points lower. The S&P 500 closing about 0.1% lower. The Nasdaq, though, it did close in the green, up almost 0.5 point, 0.5%. That is up about